On April 26, 1986, at 1:23 a.m., a nuclear reactor exploded in Ukraine. What happened next was nearly the end of Europe, and 3 men volunteered to walk into certain death to stop it. As you consider the catastrophic consequences, ask yourself, could a single safety test really have such far-reaching implications, and what series of events led to this point, given that the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had been in operation since 1977, with Reactor 4 being commissioned on December 20, 1983. In the years leading up to the disaster, the Soviet Union was experiencing a surge in nuclear energy production, with 15 nuclear reactors under construction, including the Chernobyl plant, which was designed to produce 4,000 megawatts of electricity, enough to power over 5 million homes. The plant's operators, including Anatoly Dyatlov, were under pressure to meet quotas and comply with the Soviet Union's ambitious nuclear energy targets, set by General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev, who had announced plans to increase nuclear energy production by 50% by 1990. You may wonder, what role did the Soviet Union's centralized planning and emphasis on meeting production targets play in the events that unfolded, considering that the Chernobyl plant was built using a design that had been criticized for its safety flaws, including the lack of a containment structure, which was not mandatory in Soviet nuclear plant design at the time. On the night of the disaster, a safety test was initiated by Anatoly Dyatlov, the shift supervisor, to determine how long the turbines would keep spinning and generating electricity in the event of a loss of power to the main cooling pumps, a test that violated at least 6 safety protocols, including the requirement to maintain a minimum of 15 control rods in the reactor core, and the prohibition on reducing power output below 25% of the reactor's capacity. The test began at 1 a.m., and by 1:23 a.m., the reactor had reached a power output of 30,000 megawatts, more than 3 times its normal operating level, causing a steam explosion that destroyed the reactor building and released massive quantities of radioactive material into the environment, including 50 tons of radioactive iodine and 70 tons of radioactive cesium. As you follow the sequence of events, ask yourself, how could a combination of human error, design flaws, and safety violations lead to such a catastrophic outcome, given that the reactor's power output increase was not adequately monitored, and the operators were not aware of the impending danger, despite the fact that the reactor's emergency core cooling system had been disabled to facilitate the safety test. The explosion was so powerful that it blew off the 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid of the reactor, and ejected radioactive debris into the air, including a 25-ton piece of graphite moderator that landed over 100 meters away from the reactor building. In the aftermath of the explosion, a group of 3 men, including Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bezbolov, and Boris Baranov, volunteered to drain the water from the flooded corridors beneath the reactor, to prevent a second steam explosion that could have released even more radioactive material into the environment, and potentially made Europe uninhabitable, with some estimates suggesting that up to 50% of the continent's population could have been affected. The disaster at Chernobyl had far-reaching consequences, including the evacuation of over 100,000 people from the surrounding area, and the creation of a 30-kilometer exclusion zone, which remains in place to this day, with the city of Pripyat, which was home to 49,000 people, being abandoned and left to decay, a haunting reminder of the devastating power of nuclear energy, and the importance of prioritizing safety and responsible management. You may wonder, what lessons can be learned from this tragedy, and how can they be applied to prevent similar disasters in the future, considering that the Chernobyl disaster led to a significant increase in the incidence of thyroid cancer among children in the affected areas, with some estimates suggesting that up to 20,000 cases of thyroid cancer may be linked to the disaster. The Soviet Union's initial attempts to cover up the disaster, including delaying the evacuation of Pripyat for 36 hours, and downplaying the severity of the accident, only added to the suffering and confusion, and highlighted the need for transparency and accountability in the face of catastrophic events. As you reflect on the events at Chernobyl, consider this: what is the true cost of nuclear energy, And how can we balance the need for power with the need for safety, given that the disaster at Chernobyl has been estimated to have cost over $235 billion, and the ongoing decommissioning and decontamination efforts are expected to continue for decades to come?